This is a real deep dive right now. We're going back. We're going way back right now. Do you like musicals? I love musicals. I haven't said anything yet. So, a really long time ago, I was like, I love the musical Be More Chill, and I want to be Michael. I'm gonna make Michael's hoodie. It's gonna be amazing. And I never finished it. So instead of like buying new fabric and doing a new character, I thought I would go back and attempt to finish all of the characters that I've bought fabric for and just have it finished. I have a Cosplanner app, right? And it tells you all your progress and you can add everything in it. If I go into it, you can see all of the things that I had bought. I pretty much got everything for it and then didn't make it. And I know this is old because the first picture I took of the supplies is like back in my old apartment. I've moved 3 times since then. So if I hit summary, I started this bad boy. I started this cosplay. Where is it? In 2017. November 17th, 2017 is when I started this 3 years ago. What's the date? Today is November 17th. Exactly 3 years ago, I am coming back to finish this. We're doing it. I want to be cool. I want to be as cool as Michael. I want to be more chill, you know? I want to be so cool. So I think I'm going to split this into 2 parts. First part, we're going to actually just make the base of the hoodie, just make regular hoodie, and then in part 2 we're gonna worry about the back part, the polar bear on the back, and then all of the patches. Honestly, I wanted to make my own red hoodie because I was like, I can sew a hoodie real quick. Excuse you. Look at me. You could just buy a red hoodie. You don't have to make a red hoodie if you don't want to. You could literally just buy a red hoodie. But if you wanted a certain color red and you got red hoodie fabric and you want to make a red hoodie, you're in the right place. So let's get into this. Alright, so since I started making cosplay videos, I've been trying really hard to keep track of, what fabrics I get and how much things are and the length of everything. So I'm sorry if this right here is a little scuffed right now. So I went to my Joann's and I bought red hoodie fabric. I just asked the lady where hoodie fabric was, right? And I got the red and I was like, oh, this is perfect, right? It's very soft on the inside. I have no idea what it's called because in my app back then, I didn't record anything in the comment section. In hoodie fabric, I spent about $32 on the fabric. I have no idea the length. When I looked at it, visually, it looked like I got 3 yards. Now, I've already cut out, oh my gosh, when I decided to make this, I already cut it out because this was before I even was recording videos. So this part cut out, we'll get into that later. I got 3 zippers. This is for down the middle, and these 2 are for the pockets, and they're a double zip, and I like these because I thought they were cute and I thought they would look nicer for the double pockets. And the zippers I spent about $17 on. In part 2, I'll get into the cost of all of the patches and the extra accessories. Hi, it's Current Me, editing me. Current Me is always editing me because editing me is always recording these voiceovers a couple days before you're actually seeing the video. And editing me is sick and tired of seeing me from months ago looking at myself just an absolute shame, like, oh God, why? When I first started making this cosplay years ago, every time I looked up how to make a hoodie, all the videos that came up and all the instructions were just trace out a hoodie that you already like. Like, if you want to know how to make a hoodie, you already have to own a hoodie. So I thought I'd do the same thing. So I decided to go into my closet and take out all of my hoodies and try them on one by one in an attempt to find the best one that I liked. When I finally found one that I liked the fit of, that was the one I decided to copy, and I settled on my Anime Boston hoodie. I mean, it took a while. I have so many hoodies. I'm so sorry if you don't have a base hoodie to copy from. I mean, you're screwed. You're absolutely screwed. Before I tried on all of my hoodies, I actually made sure to put on my chest binder because I knew if I was going to be wearing this to a convention and cosplaying the actual character, I'd be wearing a chest binder. Now, the Anime Boston hoodie ended up being my favorite. I believe the size was 2XL. I always like hoodies just a little bit baggier on me, and the Anime Boston one ended up having a zipper down the middle, which, not that I needed a zipper down the middle. I mean, I recommend picking out a hoodie that kind of mimics the hoodie you're trying to make, so if it doesn't have a zipper, try not to pick a hoodie with a zipper on the front. Alright, so past me from 3 years ago is an absolute idiot, because I couldn't figure out which hoodie I ended up mimicking 3 years ago, and the new hoodie that I ended up picking out wasn't the same shape as the 2 pieces I had already cut out. So a while back I was like, oh, this is so easy, just trace out the pieces, cut them out, and they didn't match up, right? My sleeves, the shoulders weren't wide enough, and yet the middle part was way too wide. So after sitting on the floor and looking at my phone for any type of help, I decided that instead of wasting fabric, that I was going to take the 2 main panels and use them to cut out the sleeves. I absolutely hate wasting fabric, and I wanted to have the most fabric in the end possible, that way I can do all of my other tests for the paint and the bear on the back. So I folded my 2 main pieces in half and then used those to then trace out the sleeves. For me, it helped to actually pin the sleeve to the fabric itself and then lightly lift it up around where it connects to the shoulder to trace it out, right? Now, this made sure that all of the fabric was totally flat, and then I knew I was getting the exact shape that I wanted. And once I was done tracing it out, I made sure to add an extra thing of seam allowance just in case. After that, once I got the first sleeve cut out, I just used that same sleeve to cut out the second one, again pinning it to the other piece of fabric. With the rest of my red fabric, I fold it in half, that way it would make it so much more easier, and laid out the hoodie as flat as I could. If you're going to be tracing out a hoodie that you have, you want to make sure that there are no like wrinkles in it and that your hoodie is flat and your fabric is flat. That way when you trace it out, you know that it's the exact shape. I always make a big deal about not wasting fabric, and yet when I folded it in half, there was obviously a little extra fabric on each of the sides, but I thought, well, that's okay. Just to make sure that my pieces were definitely symmetrical on each side, I folded my fabric in half again, and I have this yardstick to make sure that the fabric wasn't rippling on the fold mark, because now we're, instead of at 2 folds, we're at 4 folds. And I pinned the fabric together, and this is how I cut out both of the main 2 panels. I didn't want one side to be slightly off from the other, and I knew that if I folded it again and then cut it, I'd have the shape down. I'm gonna be totally honest with you, this whole part 1 is just making the base hoodie, right? Like I said in the beginning, you could buy a red hoodie if you want, and if you do, I recommend watching part 2, and then you can put all of the accessories and the patches and the bear, right? You could just buy a red hoodie. And you know what? When I got to the end, I kept thinking, why didn't I just buy a red hoodie? I don't know why. I really wanted to make one, and sometimes you're gonna get to that point where you're like, this cosplay thing, I could easily buy, but I want to make it. And when you make certain things that seem kind of easier that you could easily buy, you get such a strong satisfaction of having finished it and made it yourself. I mean, come on, you could take the easy way out, but you can do it, and I believe in you. So originally I was gonna use the hood from this hoodie, but I don't like the way that it's shaped or made, and all of my other hoodies have the same shape with the line straight down the back of the head. But I did find my jacket hoodie, which is different, which is the actual shape of the hood. So I thought I would use this one instead to make the pattern for the hood part. This hood I stole off of my winter jacket, and you could actually unzip it, which made things a lot easier.
Now this hood is basically made out of 3 parts, 2 side parts, and then 1 panel that connects them down the middle of your head, right? Now, a lot of hoodies, if you get the base hood pattern, you could basically sew the edges together, right? Flip it inside out and then sew the neck part, and then your hood's done, right? You don't have to do a lot of extra stuff. It's the hood that you prefer to have. Now, I wanted a thin hood. I didn't want to have to add or cut out multiple pieces just so my hood inside was the same as my hoodie outside. I didn't really care if the inside of the fabric of the hood was the same as the inside of the hoodie. So I cut out 3 pieces, the side piece and the middle panel. If you want that extra layer of protection like a regular hoodie, then I'd recommend cutting out 6 pieces and then sewing them all together. That way your hood is, you know, reversible or whatever. I don't know what the word is, but I'm pretty sure you know what I mean. Basically, if you don't want your seams showing on the inside of your hood, then cut out 6 pieces. That way they're all hidden between the 2 layers. If you don't mind, do like I did and just cut out your 3 pieces, and then you have a nice thin hood. Here is where things start to get a tad complicated. I took the front panel piece, even though the front and the back look exactly the same, and I pinned up about 1 inch for, you know, the cuff on the bottom, or the hem, I guess. That way I'd know how much room I had to put the zippers on. Now, the front of Michael's hoodie, sometimes I thought they were zippers, sometimes they look like pockets. The hoodie has gone through multiple evolutions, so the zippers have changed, but I decided to go with the double black zipper. To make it easier on myself, I got a piece of paper and kind of drew out the shape I wanted the zippers to be in. I didn't want them to be definitely, you know, up and down. I wanted them to be tilted in at the top ever so slightly. And I made the paper piece my pattern piece for the fabric that I was going to cut out. So this small panel was basically going to be the pocket on the inside, and I was going to sew it to the zippers after I had sewn the zippers on. Once I would fold up the bottom, then the pocket would be closed, but there would still be an opening in the top part because I didn't really want to have a seam line on the top of the zippers, so I ended up leaving it open in the end. So here is me mapping out the shape of where I want the zippers to go and cutting out a hole. I went with kind of like a long rectangle and cut the corners into slants and basically folded them inside. Then from there, I started to pin the zipper on. I'm never really that good with zippers, and this was kind of a new zipper to me. So I really wanted to make sure my edges looked nice and that I gave myself enough seam allowance. Now, I guess, you know, pick where you want your zippers to go, preferably in like a good spot where your hands are going to be. Everybody's, you know, panels are going to be different sizes for whatever you're creating. And once I got the zippers nicely pinned, I sewed them and I tried to make straight lines and go over my edges in just a box shape. And yes, I sewed right over the plastic pieces of the zipper. I'm pretty sure you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to sew over the parts of the zipper because you could break your needle in your sewing machine. But I keep doing it anyway. So here is how the zipper turned out, front and back, and I think I did pretty well. I mean, I had a couple of issues at some moments, but overall, I loved it. Now, the pocket panel that I cut out, I decided to finish off the edge with a zigzag stitch, that way it wouldn't like fray away on the inside. I mean, hoodie fabric, it doesn't really fray away that much, so you probably won't have to worry about that at all. And once I was done, I pinned it to the seam allowance on the inside where the zipper was. So I was pinning it to the extra fabric, the seam allowance, and the black part of the zipper. Sewing this on took a little bit. I wanted to make sure that the pocket panel was sewed completely to every part of the zipper except for the top and the bottom, because I knew when I folded it over then I could put stuff in my pockets without it falling out, but I knew there was going to be an opening in the top because I didn't want the seam to be in there. I just didn't want the zipper to kind of like move around. Also, keep in mind you're only sewing the pocket panel to the outside sides of the zipper. You're not going to sew them to the inside parts because then you wouldn't be able to put your hands in the zipper part, in the hole. Next is the third zipper. Now, I was having trouble figuring out where exactly I wanted this to go. I thought every time I laid it out, it seemed like it was running too long. So I sat in front of my mirror, right? And I laid the flat fabric over my chest and kind of felt where that bone is, like in the middle of your chest. And then I thought that was the perfect spot for the zipper and pinned it there. That way I knew how long the zipper should go down the front. After that, same as before, just cutting a line straight down to make a spot for the zipper and making sure there was enough seam allowance. I tried to sew it the same way as I sewed the pockets, so the bottom would have more of that square shape instead of a V shape. I basically cut the line straight down, and when I got to the middle point, I kind of went out to form a triangle and then folded the triangle in and then the sides in. So that was basically the bottom of the zipper. And of course, sewing it together and trying to get close to the edge so it all looks nice and clean. So after that, both the panels on top of each other, right sides together, I pinned the sides together and sewed them. I feel like I did a lot of things out of order. It just seemed easier to do certain things before others. So I folded up the bottom probably about an inch and maybe like a centimeter, folded another part in. So 2 folds, that way I could sew the top line and I wouldn't have to finish any of the edges. Now I did this around the whole length, and of course when I was sewing it together I went over the zipper and I had an issue sewing onto the mechanical pieces. Again, I keep sewing over the zippers. I'm not sure why. Now, depending on how long your hoodie is, you might want to try laying it over yourself again, maybe pinning the shoulders, making sure that the length isn't too long. I always give myself a centimeter, kind of a centimeter, just a little bit of fabric on the inside. That way my sewing needle will actually catch it when I'm sewing the hem. And with that, now the bottom of the pocket is closed, so I can actually put something in it without it falling outside of the hoodie. And once I was done sewing it together, of course there was, extra strings on the outside. So I took a needle and basically pulled them back in and just poked them through the seam line and then tied them off to their corresponding string on the other side and then cut the strands. We have made it to the sleeves. Easy peasy, just pin the open edge together and sew it. Also, be sure to measure your seam allowance because my sleeve hole ended up being just a little bit big than the hole in my main hoodie piece. Now it was time to pin the tops of the shoulders. Now I knew the hood was going to give me trouble, so here I am kind of pointing how much I'm sewing. I went from the edge of my shoulder almost all the way to the neck. I left maybe like an inch of space unsewn, and that was for like a safety net for me in case I ended up messing up on the hood section. If the hood ended up being too big, I wanted to at least have a chance without seam ripping of sewing it. So when I sewed it on the sewing machine and I made it to that inch mark, all I did was back stitch and then just take it off the machine. Now that the sleeves were sewn, it was time to actually pin them to the armhole and sew them there. My sleeve, they ended up being too long, so the top of it I ended up having to kind of buff out at the top. If your sleeve ends up being too big, you might want to add some easing lines to kind of ease your sleeve into the shoulder a little more nicely. I didn't care. I was like, it doesn't matter. It's a hoodie. The sleeves are going to be longer down my shoulders anyway. Does it really matter? And I just kind of morphed it into it. Now, with the pin still in, I decided to flip it inside out and try it on. I wanted to see how long the sleeves were going to land on me and see if I liked the whole fit of the, sweatshirt before I moved on. And also, when you first start pinning it, make sure your right ends are together and that the underarm seam of your sleeve lines up with the side seam of your main 2 panels. And of course, after that, just sewing the sleeves onto the armhole. Now after that, what you're going to want to do is you're going to go on the inside and kind of feel out where your seam allowance is, and you're going to pull it to go towards your wrist, right? So on the inside, you want the seam allowance folded downward into your sleeve. And then from there, you're going to go on your sewing machine and kind of sew a top stitch and sew the seam allowance going down. This you could leave it. I mean, you could leave it. You don't really have to do this, but a lot of hoodies have this kind of top stitch on both sides, and I decided just to sew the seam allowance down. That way it makes everything look really clean, right? And once I was done sewing that top line, of course I had more threads sticking out, and I just took a needle and thread again and poked them back to the inside and tied them off. So here's Bruce. He's so pretty, my pretty kitty. And here's how the hoodie's looking so far. I was just doing kind of like a check, midway check, like this is how everything should be looking, and I like the way that it looked, and all I had to do next was do the hood and the cuffs. Everything seemed perfect. It's nice to do these checks at certain times during your cosplay. That way you know that you're going towards the right direction and you don't have to go back and fix any other things. Alright, we are finally on the hood. And when you're sewing it, you're curving around the shape of the side piece of the hood. Because one piece is straight and the other two pieces are curved. And that's how it forms kind of that hood. After all your hood pieces are sewn together, what you're going to want to do is you're going to kind of fold your seam allowances in towards that middle piece. You want to make sure that they're both kind of like pointing towards each other. I don't know why that's the direction, but that's the way that my other hood was sewn. So I thought, why not copy it and make sure that they're both pointing inwards. And then you're going to do the same thing like you did on the sleeves and sew that seam allowance with a nice top stitch. So once you're done sewing both of the lines, you should have 2 top stitches with your seam allowances pointing towards each other on the inside.
Hello, it's current me. Me from probably like a couple days from when you're actually seeing this. This is my finished hood, right? Now, I was just gonna, fold this in, fold this side in, and then sew on the bottom to the actual, hoodie. But then I decided I should probably put in a little string. So, I went to the store and I got this super long shoelace. I got 72 inches and 182 centimeters. So this is what I'm going to be using to thread through the entire line of where this is going around your face. I also have extras of these. I have no idea what these are called, but if you go into any like crafts or any sewing section in Walmart, you'll know them when you see them. You basically take these little things and put them on this weird black thing, right? And then you take this and you hammer it down and it basically makes that little hole clip. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pin this in, I'm gonna fold it in and pin everything, and then I'm gonna measure about an inch from this part up, because this is all gonna be in my seam allowance, so that's gonna be all sewed inside. So I'm gonna measure an inch up from that, and then that's where I'm gonna be putting this.
So just like I did with the hem at the bottom of the hoodie, I'm folding a little bit in and then folding over it. So I'm kind of tucking in a little bit for an extra seam allowance on the inside. And I'm just pinning on the whole length side of the hood where it's going around your face. And the edges at the bottom, when I first traced out this hood pattern of the other hood, there was kind of like these extra little notches at the bottom, and I kind of cut them off as I got to the edges because I didn't end up needing them. I folded probably about an inch. I wanted to make sure that the gap was large enough for the shoestring, so make sure that your fold has enough room to actually fit a string through it. Next was the circle eye metal pieces. What you're going to do is you're going to cut a small hole, that way you can fit one of the metal pieces inside of the hole. Now, you want the one with the smaller circle to be on top. That way when you hammer it down, it folds in across the other one. Now, if you buy these, it should show you on the back the proper way to do this. I was kind of messing around and not doing it in the right direction. But just a word of advice, when you do this, you're gonna want to hammer hard. Don't try to do little taps. You're gonna want to have a nice, good slam to make it perfect. Now that I had the metal circles, I could actually slowly kind of thread through the shoelace. Just be patient, it's gonna take a little while, and make sure that it's actually going through the right direction, because when I folded over the fabric, I kind of put it underneath my fold mark instead of on the top, so it wouldn't go through the hole immediately. The shoelaces that I ended up buying, 72 inches, ended up being way too long, kind of. I ended up having like an extra foot on each side, so you probably won't need 72-inch shoelace. Now, remember when I was sewing the shoulder pieces and I pointed out that I wasn't going to sew all the way and that I was leaving an inch of room? Well, now that I was sewing the hood on, I could actually see how much room I needed. And I went ahead and cut a little bit of the top of it off and re-sewed the edge shut. Now, once the shoulders were all set, I could go ahead and pin the hood on and sew it together. Now, I was really weird about this. I wanted the end of the sewing machine to like fall off of all of the edges. So I started in the middle of the back of the hood and then kind of sewed it on twice. That way I was going off of the edge of where it was connecting with the zipper, and that way I could tie off the strings. This is the last step with the hood. The same as the tops of the sleeves and the same as the actual like hood parts. We're gonna fold the seam allowance down towards the middle, right? And you're gonna sew a nice top seam. And it's gonna make the hoodie look so nice. It's gonna tie everything together. It's gonna look beautiful. We're here at one of the very last steps, which is finishing the cuffs. I left the cuffs for last. I'm not really sure why. I'm not really doing like your standard kind of hoodie cuff, that scrunch up thing, because Michael, he kind of like rolls his sleeves up a little bit, so I didn't want that bunchiness on me, or I didn't want it like constricting my arms. So I decided to just leave it and then fold up, probably 2 folds, just like you're doing, you know, the hem. Just fold those up and sew them together. And I was able to actually fit the the wrist part over the part of my sewing machine, which made it a lot easier to sew. And after, same as before, just poking in those extra strings and tying them off on the inside. Here it is. Here is the finished hoodie. I can't believe it took me 3 years to make a hoodie. Wow. I hope you enjoyed this, even though this was kind of really scuffed. I'm so sorry this video is kind of long. It took me a while to even figure out how to explain a lot of things. It's been a struggle. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. I don't know why I'm posing like I'm a one-woman boy band, but thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a lovely day.